Have you ever heard 3 knocks on a window even though no one could possibly be standing outside? If that has never happened to you, then consider yourself lucky, because what happened to 4 friends in Portland, Washington changed their lives forever. This story happened on June 5, 2025 during the peak of summer. It all started when Aaron Miller and his friends Dylan Cooper and Caleb Foster traveled to Portland, Oregon after getting job offers from a warehouse company called Columbia Freight Solutions. Before starting work, the company asked them to arrive one day early to complete the paperwork and orientation. Their 4th friend, Brandon Hayes, had already been staying in Portland for a few days and helped them find a cheap apartment close to the warehouse. Money was tight, so none of them cared much about the condition of the place. The apartment was inside an old building called Riverside Apartments. It was located on the 3rd floor. From the front windows they could see Interstate 84, where traffic rushed by almost all day and night. Behind the building there was a large empty field covered with tall weeds and dead bushes. A few old houses stood far away, but most of them looked abandoned. Everything around the building felt strangely quiet even during the daytime. The moment Aaron stepped inside the apartment, he felt something he could not explain. His chest became heavy. The room suddenly felt colder than outside. For a second it almost felt like someone else was already standing inside watching them. Aaron quickly shook the feeling away. He blamed it on the long overnight bus ride from Washington. They had barely slept and everyone looked exhausted. He dropped his backpack near the wall and walked straight toward the bathroom to freshen up. Meanwhile, Dylan and Caleb were excitedly talking about their new jobs and discussing how their lives might finally change for the better. Brandon stayed unusually quiet. He sat near the only window in the apartment, staring outside without blinking. Aaron noticed him while drying his face. Brandon looked completely lost, as if his mind was somewhere else. Aaron smiled and asked, "What are you looking at?" Brandon suddenly flinched like someone had pulled him out of a dream. He slowly turned toward Aaron. "Nothing." That was all he said. Then he turned back toward the window and continued staring outside. Aaron exchanged a confused look with Dylan. Maybe Brandon was just tired. After all, they barely knew him. He was only Dylan's old friend and had already spent several nights inside this apartment before they arrived. Nobody thought much about his strange behavior. Later they ordered some food and spent a little time unpacking their belongings. The apartment was old but manageable. The walls had several long cracks. Some of the wooden floorboards made strange noises whenever someone walked across them. Even the ceiling looked damaged in a few places. Still, none of them cared. They were only planning to stay there until they earned enough money to rent something better. After eating, Aaron stretched out on the mattress near the wall. Within minutes he fell asleep from exhaustion. When he finally opened his eyes, the room was almost dark. The evening sun barely entered through the dirty window. For a few seconds he forgot where he was. Then he looked around. The apartment was completely empty. Dylan, Caleb, Brandon. Everyone was gone. Aaron grabbed his phone and called Dylan. Dylan answered immediately. "We came to the warehouse for paperwork. We'll be back in about 20 minutes. Aaron nodded and ended the call. His stomach was already growling again. He searched through the apartment hoping to find some snacks, but every cabinet was empty. "Guess I'll wait until they get back." He sat on the mattress scrolling through his phone while the apartment remained completely silent. About 5 minutes later, a strange sound echoed from the bathroom. It sounded exactly like someone was washing their hands. Water splashed softly against the sink. Aaron froze. He looked toward the bathroom door. Maybe Brandon came back without saying anything. Aaron called out, "Brandon." No answer. A few seconds later, the sound came again. This time it was even clearer. Someone was definitely moving inside the bathroom. Aaron stood up slowly. His heartbeat became heavier with every step. He walked toward the bathroom door. "Brandon, are you in there?" Silence. He knocked once. Nothing. He knocked again. Still nothing. The 3rd time his hand pushed the door slightly harder. The bathroom door slowly swung open on its own. Aaron looked inside. The bathroom was completely empty. The sink was dry. The floor was dry. There was nobody there. Yet only seconds earlier, he had clearly heard someone moving inside. A cold feeling slowly crawled up his spine. He stood there staring into the empty bathroom, unable to understand what had just happened. Aaron stood frozen in front of the empty bathroom. He knew exactly what he had heard. Someone had been inside only moments ago. The sound had been too clear to mistake. For several long seconds he kept staring around the small bathroom, hoping he had simply overlooked something. There was nowhere anyone could hide. The shower curtain was pulled back. The cabinet under the sink was closed. Even the tiny window above the toilet was locked from the inside. The room was completely empty. Aaron slowly stepped backward. His heartbeat refused to calm down. Just as he was trying to convince himself that exhaustion was playing tricks on his mind, he suddenly heard laughter outside the apartment. A few seconds later, the front door opened. Dylan, Caleb, and Brandon walked inside carrying paperwork from Columbia Freight Solutions. The normal sound of their voices instantly made Aaron feel better. Dylan tossed his folder onto the mattress and smiled. "Everything's set. We start tomorrow morning." Caleb laughed and dropped into a chair. "Looks like we're finally making real money." Aaron forced a smile, but his mind was still stuck on the bathroom. He decided to tell them anyway. "I swear I heard someone inside the bathroom while you guys were gone." The room became quiet for a moment. Caleb looked toward the bathroom before laughing. "Maybe the building has noisy pipes. Old apartments always make weird sounds." Dylan nodded in agreement. "You barely slept during the trip. You're probably just tired." Aaron looked at Brandon, expecting him to say something. Instead, Brandon simply stared at the floor. His face suddenly looked nervous. Aaron noticed it immediately. "You okay?" Brandon looked up. "Yeah, just tired." His answer came too quickly. Nobody questioned him any further. Later that evening, the four friends walked to a nearby diner for dinner. The neighborhood looked even stranger after sunset. Most of the nearby buildings were dark. Only a few streetlights worked. Behind Riverside Apartments, the empty field disappeared into complete darkness. Aaron glanced toward it for a second. Something about that place made him uncomfortable. He quickly looked away. After dinner, they returned to the apartment around 10 that night. The summer air was warm. Inside the apartment, it felt almost impossible to breathe. There was only one old ceiling fan that barely moved the hot air. Caleb wiped the sweat from his forehead. "There's no way I'm sleeping in here." Dylan agreed immediately. "Let's sleep on the roof. At least we'll get some fresh air." Everyone liked the idea. They carried their blankets upstairs. The rooftop was surprisingly large. Near one corner stood a huge black water tank. The rest of the rooftop was completely open. From there they could see Interstate 84 stretching into the distance. Cars rushed by every few minutes. The sound of traffic almost felt comforting. They spread their blankets near the center of the roof. For the next couple of hours they talked about everything. Their families, old memories, plans for the future, the jobs they would begin the next morning. Time passed quickly. Before they realized it, the clock had already crossed 1 in the morning. Brandon hardly spoke during the conversation. He mostly listened while staring into the darkness surrounding the building. Eventually Caleb yawned. "We should get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Within minutes, Caleb and Brandon were asleep. Aaron and Dylan stayed awake scrolling through their phones. Everything seemed perfectly normal, until Dylan suddenly stopped moving. His eyes locked onto the water tank. Aaron noticed his expression. "What's wrong?" Dylan slowly pointed without taking his eyes away. "Someone standing behind the tank." Aaron turned immediately. He looked carefully. The rooftop was empty. Nobody was there. "What are you talking about?" "There's nobody there." Dylan frowned. "I swear there was. Someone dressed in white, just standing there, not moving at all." Aaron stood up anyway. He walked toward the tank. Every step echoed softly across the concrete roof. When he finally reached it, he looked behind the tank. Nothing. He checked both sides. Nothing. He even looked underneath the metal platform supporting it. Still nothing. Aaron walked back, shaking his head. "You probably caught a shadow. New place. Long day. Your eyes are playing tricks on you." Dylan looked back toward the tank one last time. The figure had completely disappeared. He wanted to believe Aaron was right. But deep inside, he knew exactly what he had seen. Something had been standing there, watching them. Without saying another word, Dylan lay back down. Neither of them noticed that Brandon was no longer asleep. His eyes were open, quietly staring toward the same water tank where Dylan had seen the figure. And for the first time that night, Brandon looked genuinely terrified. The rooftop slowly became silent. Only the distant sound of traffic echoed from Interstate 84. A warm breeze drifted across the building while the city seemed to fall asleep. Around 2:30 in the morning, everyone was asleep except Aaron. He had always been a night owl and sleep never came easily. Lying on his blanket, he scrolled through his phone before calling an old friend back home. As they talked, Aaron stood up and slowly walked toward the edge of the rooftop. From there, he had a perfect view of the highway below. At this hour, almost no cars were passing. The road looked strangely empty. Streetlights painted the pavement with long yellow shadows. Aaron continued talking on the phone until something moving in the distance caught his attention. A woman. She was walking alone along the side of the highway. She wore a long red dress that swayed gently with every step. Her dark hair covered most of her face. She moved slowly, almost too slowly. Aaron stopped speaking. His friend asked if everything was okay. Aaron ignored the question. His eyes stayed locked on the woman. She kept walking without looking around. Then suddenly, She stopped. Without warning, she slowly turned her head. Even from the rooftop, Aaron felt as though she was looking directly at him. A chill spread through his entire body. He could not explain how, but he knew she was staring at him. Then he noticed something even worse. Her eyes. They reflected the streetlights with an unnatural glow, like the eyes of an animal watching from the darkness. Aaron forgot he was even holding his phone. Neither of them moved. Several long seconds passed. Then a loud door slammed somewhere inside the building. The sudden noise made Aaron jump. He instinctively turned toward the rooftop entrance. The sound had come from downstairs. Maybe one of his friends had gone to the bathroom. When he looked back toward the highway, the woman was gone. The road was completely empty. There was nowhere she could have disappeared. No nearby cars, no buildings, no side streets. She had simply vanished. Aaron felt his stomach tighten. Just then, a terrified scream exploded from inside the building. It echoed through the entire apartment complex. Aaron instantly recognized the voice. It was Dylan. Aaron dropped his phone and sprinted toward the rooftop stairs. Caleb and Brandon woke up immediately. What happened? That was Dylan. The three of them raced downstairs as fast as they could. Their footsteps echoed through the narrow staircase. When they reached the apartment floor, they found Dylan standing outside the bathroom. His entire body was shaking. His face had turned completely pale. He looked like he had just seen something impossible. Caleb grabbed his shoulders. What happened? Talk to us. For several seconds, Dylan could not speak. His breathing was so fast he almost sounded out of breath. Aaron handed him a bottle of water. Slowly, Dylan took a few deep breaths. Then he looked at all three of them with terrified eyes. There was someone in there. Aaron frowned. Who? Dylan swallowed hard. I don't know. They helped him back inside the apartment. All four friends sat together on the floor. Nobody joked anymore. Nobody smiled. The fear inside the room felt heavier than the summer heat. After calming down, Dylan finally began explaining what had happened. When I came downstairs, the staircase was completely dark. There isn't a single light working. I used my phone flashlight to reach the apartment. The whole time I felt like someone was following me, watching every step. At first I ignored it. I kept telling myself I was only thinking about what I saw near the water tank. When I entered the apartment, everything looked normal. I turned on the lights, checked every corner. Nobody was there. So I went into the bathroom. Everything was fine for the first few seconds. Then I started feeling like someone was standing right outside the bathroom door, so close that I could almost feel them breathing. I listened carefully. At first there was nothing. Then I heard it. A scratching sound. Very soft. Like someone slowly dragging a fingernail across the bathroom door. Dylan looked down at the floor as his hands started shaking again. I asked who was there. Nobody answered. The scratching stopped. For maybe 5 seconds everything became completely quiet. Then it started again. Even louder this time. Aaron felt his own heartbeat getting faster. Dylan continued speaking. I thought it was Aaron trying to scare me. So I yelled his name. I told him to stop joking around. Nobody answered. Then I looked toward the small metal vent near the top of the bathroom door. And that's when I saw it. Dylan stopped talking. His breathing became uneven. Aaron quietly asked, "What did you see?" Dylan slowly looked up. A hand. Black fingers. Rotten-looking fingers. They slowly wrapped around the metal vent from the outside, like someone was trying to look inside. I saw every finger clearly. It wasn't human. I know what I saw. It stayed there for several seconds. Then it disappeared. That's when I screamed. I swear I'm not making this up. The apartment fell completely silent. Nobody laughed this time, because the fear in Dylan's face was far too real to fake. At that exact moment, a deafening crash came from directly above them. Something incredibly heavy had just slammed onto the rooftop. All four friends looked toward the ceiling. Then another sound followed. Slow, loud, dragging across the concrete roof, as if something massive was being pulled from one end of the rooftop to the other. No one moved. No one even breathed. Whatever was above them, it was no longer hiding. The dragging sound continued across the rooftop. Slow, heavy, deliberate. It sounded as if something enormous was being pulled directly above their heads. Every scrape echoed through the old ceiling. Aaron looked at the others. No one spoke. No one even dared to move. The apartment suddenly felt much smaller than before. After several long seconds, the dragging finally stopped. For a brief moment, complete silence filled the room. Then Brandon quietly spoke. I knew something was wrong with this place. Everyone turned toward him. Aaron stared at him in disbelief. What do you mean? Brandon kept looking at the floor before answering. Ever since I moved into this apartment, I've been hearing strange things. Almost every night someone walks across the roof. Sometimes I hear footsteps outside this room. When I open the door, nobody is there. I thought I was imagining it. I didn't want you guys to think I was crazy. Dylan's face changed immediately. You already knew this place was haunted. Why didn't you tell us before we moved in? Brandon shook his head. Because I wasn't sure. I kept telling myself it was just an old building. Old buildings make strange noises. I wanted to believe there was a normal explanation. But after everything that's happened tonight, I don't believe that anymore. Before anyone could respond, another loud thump shook the ceiling. This time it sounded much closer. Immediately after it came slow footsteps. One step, then another, then another. Each step landed directly above the apartment. Whoever or whatever it was, it seemed to be walking in circles. Caleb whispered, "We're all down here. So who's upstairs?" Nobody answered. Aaron slowly stood up. He walked to the apartment door and locked it. Then he pushed a chair underneath the handle. It probably wouldn't stop anything, but it made everyone feel slightly safer. The footsteps continued for another minute. Then suddenly everything stopped again. The silence felt even worse. Aaron could hear everyone's breathing. Then out of the corner of his eye, he noticed movement near the window. Someone was standing outside. Just for a second, a dark figure, completely still. Aaron immediately pointed toward the glass. Someone's outside. The others looked toward the window. The shadow had already disappeared. Caleb frowned. Outside where? We are on the 3rd floor. There's no balcony, no fire escape, nothing outside that window. Aaron realized Caleb was right. The wall outside dropped straight to the ground. There was nowhere anyone could stand. He opened his mouth to explain what he had seen. Before he could speak, knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks landed against the window. Every sound was perfectly clear. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. All 4 friends stared at the glass. There was nothing outside. Only darkness. Aaron felt every hair on his arms stand up. Dylan whispered, "Who just knocked?" No one answered. A few seconds later, a woman's soft laugh drifted through the window. It was quiet, almost gentle, but there was something horribly wrong about it. The sound seemed to close, as if she were standing only inches away from the glass. Caleb covered his mouth. Brandon slowly backed away from the window. Aaron felt his legs becoming weak. The laughter lasted only a few seconds. Then it stopped, leaving behind complete silence. No traffic, no footsteps, no scratching, nothing. The clock on Aaron's phone read exactly 3 in the morning. Nobody wanted to look outside. Nobody wanted to go near the window. They all stayed exactly where they were, trying to understand what was happening. Aaron finally whispered, "We can't just sit here doing nothing. We need to pray. Read something. Anything. Maybe it'll help." Everyone silently agreed. Dylan grabbed his phone with shaking hands. He searched for a prayer. A moment later, the soft sound of a prayer filled the apartment. As the words echoed through the room, something unexpected happened. The footsteps above them stopped completely. The building became silent. Even the uneasy feeling inside the room seemed to weaken. For the first time that night, all 4 friends felt a tiny sense of relief. But that relief lasted only a few seconds. Aaron suddenly noticed Caleb. His entire body had started trembling. At first nobody paid attention. They thought he was simply terrified. Then his breathing became louder. His head slowly dropped forward. His shoulders began shaking uncontrollably. Aaron moved closer. "Caleb, are you okay?" No response. Dylan lowered the volume on the phone. Brandon stared at Caleb without blinking. The shaking became more violent. Then, very slowly, Caleb lifted his head. The moment his face came into the light, every person in the room froze. His eyes were no longer normal. They had turned an unnatural deep red. His face looked completely different, as if someone else was staring back at them through Caleb's body. And then, without moving his lips very much, he spoke in a voice that did not belong to him. "Turn it off." The room instantly fell silent. Nobody moved. Nobody even blinked. Aaron stared at Caleb, trying to convince himself this had to be some kind of panic attack. There had to be a logical explanation. But the voice that had just come out of Caleb's mouth did not belong to him. It sounded deeper, older, almost as if two different voices were speaking at the same time. One sounded like Caleb. The other sounded like someone else. Something else. Caleb slowly tilted his head until it rested at an unnatural angle. His red eyes remained fixed on Dylan's phone. "Turn it off." His voice was louder this time. Aaron carefully took one step toward him. "Caleb, can you hear me?" No response. Caleb kept staring at the phone. The prayer continued playing softly through the speaker. Suddenly Caleb screamed, "Turn it off." The sound shook the entire apartment. Dylan instinctively stepped backward. His hands were trembling so badly he almost dropped the phone. Aaron tried to stay calm. "Nobody's turning anything off. Just relax. We'll help you." For several seconds Caleb remained perfectly still. Then, without warning, he stood up. The movement happened so fast that none of them had time to react. He walked toward the old metal bed frame standing against the wall. The frame was heavy enough that it normally took two people to move it. Caleb grabbed it with one hand. Aaron watched in disbelief. There was no way one person could lift it, especially not with one hand. Caleb shoved the entire bed several feet across the room. The metal legs scraped violently against the floor. The sound echoed through the apartment. Everyone froze. No one spoke. No one understood where that kind of strength had come from. Caleb slowly turned toward them. His breathing sounded unnatural, almost like growling. Turn it off. His words came out slowly, each one sounding more threatening than the last. Dylan tightened his grip on the phone. Number. I'm not stopping it. Whatever happens, happens. The moment those words left Dylan's mouth, Caleb let out a furious roar. His voice no longer sounded human. I'll kill all of you. Aaron felt his entire body go numb. Before anyone could react, a new sound filled the apartment. Soft, gentle, metallic. The unmistakable sound of ankle bells. Someone was walking inside the room. Slowly. Step, step, step. The sound circled around them, but there was no one there. The footsteps were invisible. Only the delicate chime of the anklets echoed through the apartment. Dylan looked toward the empty corner near the window. Aaron stared toward the hallway. Brandon backed against the wall, unable to breathe. The sound kept moving. Around them, closer, then farther away, as if an invisible woman were slowly walking around the room. Aaron finally shouted, "Run!" The four friends reacted instantly. Aaron, Dylan, and Brandon rushed toward the apartment door. Aaron pulled the chair away, unlocked the door. The three of them stumbled into the hallway. Caleb never tried to stop them. He simply stood in the middle of the apartment, watching, smiling. His smile stretched across his face in a way none of them had ever seen before. Aaron slammed the heavy metal door shut. Brandon quickly locked it from the outside. All three of them leaned against the door using every bit of their weight. Almost immediately, something slammed into the other side. Bang! The entire door shook. Another impact came seconds later. Then another. Caleb was throwing himself against the door with unbelievable force. Open it! Open the door! His voice echoed through the hallway, but it no longer sounded like Caleb. It sounded like a woman screaming through his throat. The three friends looked at each other. Nobody dared answer. Inside the apartment, furniture crashed against the walls. Glass shattered. Objects slammed onto the floor. It sounded as though someone was destroying everything inside. Then came another violent hit against the door. The metal frame rattled. Aaron pressed harder with his shoulder. If this door opened, none of them believed they would survive what was inside. There were no other tenants living in the building. No security. No landlord. No one coming to help. The only thing they could do was hold that door closed and pray that morning arrived before whatever was inside found a way out. Aaron, Dylan, and Brandon kept their shoulders pressed against the metal door. None of them dared let go. Every few seconds another violent crash came from inside the apartment. Furniture slammed against the walls. Glass shattered across the floor. It sounded as though someone was destroying everything inside. Then suddenly, everything stopped. The silence felt even more terrifying than the noise. Aaron looked at Dylan. Did he stop? Nobody answered. They were too afraid to move. Several minutes passed. Not a single sound came from inside the apartment. Still, none of them unlocked the door. Finally, Brandon broke the silence. There's something I never told you. Aaron slowly turned toward him. What are you talking about? Brandon lowered his head. When I first moved into this apartment, I met an old man who owned the small convenience store across the street. He asked me where I was staying. The moment I told him Riverside Apartments, his face changed. He told me one thing before I left. Never stay on the roof after midnight. Aaron frowned. Why didn't you tell us this before? Because I thought he was just trying to scare me. People tell ghost stories all the time. I didn't believe him. Aaron stared at Brandon in disbelief. Go on. The next afternoon, I asked a few people around the neighborhood about this building. Almost everyone avoided the subject, but one elderly woman finally agreed to tell me what happened. About 8 years ago, before this apartment building was here, there was a small house behind this property near the empty field. A family lived there with their daughter. She was only 26 years old. She was supposed to get married, just days before the wedding. She died. Nobody knows exactly how. Some people believe she took her own life. Others believed someone murdered her. A few claimed the man she loved betrayed her. Every person told a different story, but everyone agreed on one thing. After her death, strange things started happening around the property. People driving along Interstate 84 late at night reported seeing a woman wearing a long red dress walking beside the highway. Some said she disappeared whenever they got close. Others claimed they saw her standing silently on rooftops, watching people from a distance. Several families tried living on this property. None of them stayed very long. Most of them moved away within weeks. Eventually, the old house was demolished. Years later, Riverside Apartments was built on the same land. But according to the locals, whatever haunted that property never left. Aaron felt his heartbeat growing faster. He remembered the woman he had seen beside the highway. The glowing eyes, the red dress. She matched Brandon's story perfectly. Dylan looked at Brandon with anger. You knew all this. You knew people had been leaving this place for years. Brandon shook his head. I thought it was only an old neighborhood legend. Nothing had ever happened to me except hearing footsteps. I never actually saw anyone. Not until tonight. Nobody spoke after that. The hallway became silent again. The only sound came from the distant traffic outside. Nearly 30 minutes passed. No more banging. No more screams. No more footsteps. Aaron still refused to unlock the apartment. If whoever had taken control of Caleb was waiting quietly inside, opening that door could be the biggest mistake of their lives. They decided to stay exactly where they were until sunrise. None of them slept. Every few minutes Aaron checked the time on his phone. The night felt endless. Around 5:30 in the morning, the first light of dawn slowly entered through the broken hallway window. The darkness finally began to disappear. Birds started singing outside. For the first time in hours, the building almost looked normal again. Aaron looked at the others. I think it's morning. Brandon nodded slowly. Let's see if he's okay. Aaron took a deep breath. His hands slowly reached for the lock. None of them knew what they were about to find on the other side of that door. Aaron wrapped his trembling fingers around the lock. For a few seconds nobody moved. The hallway was completely silent. Even the building itself felt lifeless. Aaron slowly unlocked the metal door. He pushed it open only a few inches. Nothing happened. No screams. No footsteps. No movement. He opened the door a little farther. The apartment looked completely destroyed. The metal bed had been thrown across the room. Broken glass covered the floor. The wooden table was lying upside down. The chairs were shattered into pieces. Every cabinet door stood wide open. It looked as though a tornado had passed through the apartment. Aaron carefully stepped inside. Dylan and Brandon followed close behind. They searched every corner. Caleb was nowhere to be seen. Then Brandon pointed toward the far corner of the room. Over there, Aaron rushed across the broken furniture. Caleb was lying unconscious beside the wall. His clothes were covered with dust. Several cuts covered his hands and arms. Dried blood stained his fingers. It looked as though he had been dragging himself across the floor all night. Aaron knelt beside him. Caleb, can you hear me? After a few seconds, Caleb slowly opened his eyes. He looked completely confused. His breathing was weak. Aaron helped him sit up. Are you okay? Caleb looked around the destroyed apartment with fear. What happened? Why does the room look like this? Dylan stared at him. You really don't remember. Caleb slowly shook his head. The last thing I remember is all of us sitting together while Dylan played the prayer on his phone. After that, everything became blurry. Aaron exchanged a nervous look with Brandon. Caleb continued speaking. It felt like I wasn't inside this room anymore. I was standing somewhere completely dark. There was no light, no walls, nothing. Just endless darkness. I tried calling your names. Nobody answered. Then I felt someone standing behind me. Very close. I was too scared to turn around. But eventually I did. The room became completely silent. Even Aaron stopped breathing. Caleb looked down at his shaking hands. She was standing there. A woman wearing a long red dress. Her hair covered most of her face. At first I couldn't see her eyes. She slowly lifted her head. They weren't normal. Her eyes were completely white. Not glowing. Just empty. Like there was nothing inside them. Aaron felt a cold chill race through his body. It was the same woman he had seen beside the highway. Caleb continued. She smiled at me, but it wasn't a normal smile. It kept getting wider. Wider than any human face should be able to smile. Then she whispered something into my ear. Aaron leaned closer. What did she say? Caleb closed his eyes. I couldn't understand every word, but I clearly heard one sentence. This is my home. Leave, before it's too late. The room fell silent. Nobody questioned Caleb, because every detail matched what Aaron had seen on the highway. It matched Brandon's story. It matched everything that had happened during the night. None of them wanted another minute inside Riverside Apartments. Without saying another word, they packed whatever belongings had survived. They left the broken furniture exactly where it was. Nobody bothered cleaning anything. Nobody even looked back as they walked out of the apartment. As they reached the street, Aaron couldn't stop himself. He turned around for one last look at the third-floor window. At first it looked empty. Then, for just a single second, he saw someone standing behind the dirty glass. A woman, wearing a long red dress, perfectly still, watching them leave. Before Aaron could warn the others, she disappeared again. as if she had never been there. They never returned to Riverside Apartments again, but Aaron would soon discover, leaving that apartment did not mean the nightmare was over. The four friends left Riverside Apartments without saying a word. None of them cared about the security deposit. None of them wanted to collect the rest of their belongings. Getting away from that building was all that mattered. Later that afternoon they found another apartment several miles away on the other side of Portland. It was smaller, more expensive, but the moment they stepped inside, the heavy feeling that had followed them all morning disappeared. For the first time since arriving in Oregon, they felt safe. None of them went to work that day. They spent the entire afternoon talking about everything that had happened. Every strange moment, every sound, every shadow, every single detail matched. Aaron had seen the woman beside the highway. Dylan had seen the figure behind the rooftop water tank and the rotten hand outside the bathroom. Brandon had heard the stories from the local residents. Caleb had seen the same woman while he was unconscious. None of them had described her differently. The red dress, the long dark hair, the unnatural smile. It was always the same woman. That realization frightened them more than anything else. A few days later, Brandon decided to visit the old convenience store across from Riverside Apartments. The elderly owner recognized him immediately. Before Brandon could even ask a question, the old man quietly said, "You left the apartment, didn't you?" Brandon slowly nodded. The old man looked relieved. Then he said something Brandon would never forget. "You're lucky she allowed you to leave. Not everyone gets that chance." Brandon asked what he meant. The old man looked toward the apartment building across the street. Years ago, several people ignored the warnings. Some stayed for weeks, others stayed for months, but every family eventually left after seeing the same woman. A few people disappeared completely. Nobody ever learned what happened to them. The police never found any answers. After hearing that, Brandon never went back to that neighborhood again. Almost a year passed. Life slowly returned to normal. The four friends continued working at Columbia Freight Solutions. Eventually they laughed about many things that had happened in their lives, but never about that night. Whenever the conversation reached Riverside Apartments, the room always became quiet. None of them liked remembering what they had seen. Aaron especially could never forget the woman's eyes. Sometimes he still dreamed about standing on that rooftop, watching her walk slowly along Interstate 84, only to stop, turn toward him, and smile. Even today, whenever the four friends meet, they all agree on one thing. If they had stayed inside Riverside Apartments for even one more night, at least one of them might never have come back. Sometimes surviving is not about being brave. Sometimes surviving means knowing exactly when to walk away. That was the last time any of them ever saw Riverside Apartments. Or at least, that's what they believe. Because some places never truly let you leave. Some places simply wait for the next person to move in. A few months after leaving Riverside Apartments, Aaron thought the nightmare was finally over. Life slowly returned to normal. The strange dreams became less frequent. The fear faded with time. Eventually, all four friends stopped talking about what had happened inside that apartment. It became one of those memories they tried to bury forever. Then one evening, Aaron received a phone call from Dylan. His voice sounded nervous. He had been driving home from work using Interstate 84. As he passed the road near Riverside Apartments, he saw a woman standing beside the highway. She was wearing the same long red dress. She wasn't moving. She was simply watching the traffic. Dylan refused to stop. He drove away as fast as he could. Aaron tried to convince himself it was only a coincidence. Maybe it was another woman wearing a similar dress. Maybe fear was making Dylan imagine things. A week later, Caleb called. He had experienced something even stranger. While cleaning out an old backpack, he found a small photograph. It showed the four friends standing outside Riverside Apartments on the day they moved in. Aaron, Dylan, Caleb, and Brandon were all smiling. But there was something else in the picture. Standing behind the third-floor window, barely visible through the dirty glass, was a woman wearing a long red dress. None of them remembered anyone standing there when the picture was taken. Caleb deleted the photo immediately. He never wanted to see it again. A few days later, Brandon quit his job and moved to another state. He never explained why. He simply told the others that he wanted a fresh start. None of them tried to stop him. Some memories are too heavy to carry forever. Exactly 1 year after that night, Aaron drove past the neighborhood one final time. He had no intention of stopping. He only wanted to prove to himself that he was no longer afraid. As he passed Riverside Apartments, he looked toward the third floor. Every window was dark. The building looked abandoned. Aaron smiled to himself. Maybe everything really was over. Then his phone vibrated. A message arrived from an unknown number. There was no text, only a single photograph. Aaron's hands tightened around the steering wheel. It was a picture of his car, taken only a few seconds earlier. The photo had been captured from the third-floor window of Riverside Apartments. His blood ran cold. Before he could react, another message appeared. This time there were only 4 words. I never left Aaron. Aaron immediately looked toward the building again. The third-floor window was no longer empty. A woman wearing a long red dress stood perfectly still behind the glass. Her pale face was turned directly toward him, and slowly, almost impossibly, she smiled. Aaron slammed the accelerator and never looked back. To this day, none of the 4 friends have ever returned to Riverside Apartments. And if someone offers you a cheap apartment beside Interstate 84 in East Portland, you might want to ask one question before moving in. Who lived there before you? Because sometimes, the previous resident never really leaves. So this was the story. If you enjoyed it, then like, share, follow Nightmare Files for more true horror stories.